The Nightly Business Report.
Good evening. Tonight, the IMF says that it will continue to assist Sri Lanka with talks with bondholders and continues to stress the importance of following the IMF program in the next 2 years. Dialog Axiata gets the nod from the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka to merge with Airtel operations in Sri Lanka, thus creating the biggest telco network on the island. Stocks are back in the red again after the government's mixed signals on debt restructuring sent jitters to the market. And Adidas, on the front foot after exiting the Kanye West deal, hopes to gain more than $700 million in revenue this year.
From Studio 24, here's Sina Mayadune.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Our coverage tonight begins in Washington, D.C., where the IMF and World Bank spring meetings are currently underway. Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, says that countries like Sri Lanka must continue on the path proposed by the body in order to reap the full benefits of economic reforms. She made these comments a few hours ago while presenting the global policy agenda of the IMF at the spring meeting event in Washington, D.C.
Divergences within and across groups of countries are growing, with poorer countries falling even further behind. In this context, we have the meetings and we are presenting our global policy agenda, focusing on three priorities. First, rebuilding fiscal buffers. We have long advocated that while central banks pursue return of inflation to target, they can use some help from the fiscal side. Now, fiscal restraint is becoming even more important on its own right because fiscal capacity is exhausted in most countries and debt is dangerously up. In a world where crises keep coming, countries must urgently build fiscal resilience to be prepared for the next shock. As hard as it is, when still part of the population needs support and half of the world is going to the polls, the time has come to adopt medium-term frameworks for fiscal consolidation. We recognize one size does not fit all. The pace and speed of consolidation will vary depending on country circumstances. So will also the balance between mobilizing revenue and improving spending efficiency.
An IMF spokesperson said today that the International Monetary Fund is ready to support Sri Lanka's discussions with international bondholders and will provide a formal assessment after the parties reach a tentative agreement in principle. The spokesperson said that the IMF hopes to reach an agreement consistent with the parameters of the IMF-supported program and official creditors' comparability of treatment requirements can be made soon.
The Sri Lankan government said it failed to reach an agreement with bondholders to restructure about $12 billion of debt earlier this week, raising concerns that the island nation could be delayed in receiving a third tranche of its $2.9 billion IMF program in June. The government said one of the main stumbling blocks had been that the baseline parameters of the bondholders' plan had not matched those embedded in its IMF program. Yesterday, State Minister of Finance Shahan Singha, speaking to the Nightly Business Report, said that the government is hopeful that the IMF will continue to support the efforts in good faith. Meanwhile, the IMF said that they will continue to consult with both bondholders and the government with the aim of finding a common ground in the debt restructuring process.
Sri Lanka is expecting to conclude all transactions related to the divestiture of state-owned enterprises by August this year under an ambitious reform process. The government-led state-owned enterprises restructuring unit said that the divestiture of loss-making Sri Lankan airlines is likely to be concluded by September.
The restructuring unit has already called for bids for requests for qualification to divest Hotel Developers Lanka Limited, Canmil Holdings Private Limited, Lanka Hospitals Corporation PLC, Sri Lanka Telecom PLC, Litrogas, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation Life Limited, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation General Limited and Sri Lankan Airlines. The SOERU said that the deadlines for submitting RFQs for Hotel Developers Lanka Limited, Canmil Holdings Private Limited, Lanka Hospitals Corporation PLC, Sri Lanka Telecom PLC, Litrogas, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation Life Limited and Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation General Limited have now closed, while for Sri Lankan Airlines it remains open until the 22nd of this month. The International Monetary Fund has strongly asked for SOE reforms to reduce losses in those institutions. However, the government has yet to conclude reform in any of the selected SOEs despite the island nation has declared bankruptcy 2 years ago.
Sri Lanka's Commercial Credit and Finance PLC said a Singapore firm had ordered the liquidation of its second largest shareholder, which owns 29.99% of the firm. In a stock exchange filing, Commercial Credit said that Cosimo Barrel of Kroll Private Limited has been appointed liquidator for Group Lease Holdings Private Limited. However, Group Lease Public Company Limited of Thailand, the sole shareholder and secured creditor of Group Lease Holdings Private Limited, has appealed the decision. Explaining the current situation, Commercial Credit, in a statement, said that operations of the company will proceed and will not be impacted by these new developments as of now, as Commercial Credit and Finance PLC has no financial or operational dependencies on Group Lease Holdings Limited or any of its related parties. The information technology industry in Sri Lanka is requesting the government to finalize and speed up the implementation of the foundation work in establishing a digital framework that would aid the country's efforts to become an IT leader in the region. Speaking to the Nightly Business Report, the CEO of WSO2, Sanjeeva Veeravarna, said that the government's current proposals are still moving at a snail's pace in being actionable.
The digital industry in Sri Lanka has had a few good years. COVID, of course, helped in some fashion for many parts of the world because it rapidly expanded the digital adoption. Of course, since COVID, since 2022 Ukraine war started and inflation started kicking in globally, there's been quite a slowdown in the global market for digital products as well and digital services as well. So that is having a negative impact on the other side. But Sri Lanka's industry is doing okay in the global context, I would say. In the local context, I think it is still really hamstrung by the lack of common digital infrastructure. Digital ID, which we've been talking about for years, is still not there. A few things like that. Our payment infrastructure is okay, but not adopted enough. So I think the government really needs to put effort to fixing this foundation layer, so that everybody can build and make Sri Lanka into a beautiful digital country.
Let's take a short break. The latest data from the stock market is on the other side. This is the Nightly Business Report. Welcome back to the Nightly Business Report. Let's take you to the stock market now. Now, the both indices at this Colombo Stock Exchange slipped back to the red after the government sent mixed signals about debt restructuring efforts. The all share price index was down about 0.5 percentage point, while S&P SL20 was down about 1 percentage point as well. In order to break down the data for you, let's go to Ranjan Ranatunga from First Capital Holdings.
Thank you. The Colombos show another day of volatile trading today, with SPI falling by 33 points to close the day at 11,797. The main reason prompting the SPI to fall was the uncertainty regarding the debt restructuring talks that is currently happening with the bondholders with the Sri Lankan government. The main causes for the SPI to drop was the profit taking on the banking sector, while the interest on the index heavyweights like John Keel's Holdings, Hemas Holdings and CTC slightly pushed up the index during today. Meanwhile, on the retail front, there was active retail participation observed on the market, mainly coming on to the Capital Alliance share due to the dividend they proposed yesterday of 15 rupees per share. Meanwhile, the volumes continue to remain thin, with the total turnover coming to around 2 billion rupees. While comparing this to the monthly turnover, which was at 2.2 billion, the turnover was down by 10% during the day. Meanwhile, on the top gainers for the day, we had Blue Diamond share, non-voting share, which was the leading top gainer for the day, followed by the Industrial Assault, Nation Lanka, and Mercantile Shipping Limited. While among the top losers, HNB Finance non-voting, Commercial Credit, and Sarvodaya Development Finance were among the top losers for the day.
The government is hoping to bring the dollar rate down with the economy slowly getting back on track. Is this really the case? We pose that question to research analyst at First Capital Holdings, Dimantha Matthews.
From here on, what we are expecting is that there is likely to be some amount of stabilization for the currency. So the main reasons for the appreciation were, if you take on the importers side, we saw significant amounts of imports happening during the October to December period, just before the spike in taxes, and because of that there was sufficient quantities already imported, sufficient for the January to March period. So during the January to March period, there was a significant decline in the amount of imports from overseas. And then if you look at the other reasons, the period is also a period where you have a high amount of dollar inflows. On one side it is the peak season for tourism, and on the other side it is also the peak season for worker remittances, with March being the highest. As the economy recovers and as consumer demand comes back into the system, you tend to see some amount of depreciation happening in the currency. So during the second half of the year we may see some amount of depreciation, but we think more likely than not it will be in the range of 310 to 320.
Gold futures, while edging up today, showed signs of consolidation within a narrow range, highlighting a mix of bullish and bearish sentiments among investors. The global economic and political context, including U.S. monetary policy and geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, plays a significant role in influencing gold's current market dynamics. In regional markets, gold was trading at $2,379.63, up by around 0.79%. In the short term, gold markets are likely to see a volatile trading with a bearish bias due to the strong dollar and higher interest rates. Oil prices fell for a fourth day as the premium traders put on geopolitical risks subsided, and U.S. inventories reached their highest levels since June. Global benchmark Brent traded below $87 a barrel after slumping 3% on Wednesday. West Texas Intermediate was at about $82. U.S. crude inventories rose by 2.7 million barrels last week, while gauges of fuel demand declined. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan rupee has depreciated further against the US dollar today compared to yesterday. Accordingly, the buying rate of the US dollar has increased from 295 rupees and 28 cents to 296 rupees and 90 cents. The selling rate was also increased from 305 rupees and 19 cents to 306 rupees and 41 cents. Here's a look at how the rupee fared against the other currencies during the day today. But now, the latest from the business world in Sri Lanka right after this. This is the Nightly Business Report. Welcome back to the Nightly Business Report. Dialog Axiata Group and Bharti Airtel have signed a definitive agreement to merge operations in Sri Lanka. Airtel announced this is a stock exchange filing on the Bombay Stock Exchange.
Under this agreement, Dialog will acquire 100% of the issued shares in Airtel Lanka, in consideration of which Dialog will issue to Bharti Airtel ordinary voting shares, which will amount to 10.35% of the total issued shares of Dialog by way of a share swap. The Telecommunications Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka has granted its approval for the proposed merger. Meanwhile, in the filing to the Colombo Stock Exchange, Dialog informed that trading of Dialog Axiata shares on the Colombo board will be halted pending further disclosure. Market participants said that the shares saw foreign buying interest when it last traded on the CSE yesterday and closed up to 11.7.
Sri Lanka Insurance concludes the year 2023 with remarkable success, achieving an impressive profit before taxation of 10.6 billion rupees, reflecting a robust improvement in combined gross written premium of 44.2 billion rupees, marking a growth of 7.2%.
As of December 31st, 2023, Sri Lanka Insurance Life recorded a premium volume of Rs 21 billion, while Sri Lanka Insurance General recorded a premium value of 23.1 billion rupees. The company disbursed an impressive 27.6 billion rupees to policyholders in the form of maturity settlements and combined claim payments in addition to the 10.4 billion bonus declaration, underscoring the company's steadfast commitment to honouring its obligations and ensuring the trustworthiness of its investment services. Solidifying its strong financial positions, SLIC has been able to continuously increase its asset base and life fund over the years.
Hunas Holdings recently announced a strategic partnership with BCC Corporation Japan, a renowned innovator in technology, hospitality and real estate solutions. Together, they are introducing a groundbreaking advancement poised to transform how hotel accommodations are booked and managed. The collaboration introduces an innovative platform using blockchain and non-fungible token technology while enhancing flexibility and investment opportunities for travelers and stakeholders alike. The Nafutel platform, developed jointly by Hunas Holdings Private Limited and SBCC Private Limited, a subsidiary of BCC Corporation Japan, presents a multifaceted solution that caters to the diverse needs of travelers and investors. AI Insurance and Commercial Bank held the official launch event for their exclusive bancassurance partnership, heralding a new era of financial security and unparalleled services for Sri Lankans. The partnership was unveiled amidst a digitally transformative launch event at the Shangri-La Colombo in the presence of distinguished guests from both organizations, esteemed customers and notable dignitaries. In a manifestation of the theme Redefining Synergy, the event highlighted the collaboration between two corporate giants, both with a legacy of over 100 years. Visa, the global payment solutions company, honored Commercial Bank of Ceylon for excellence in launch of affluent and mass corporate card variants. The occasion held at Visa Commercial Solutions Client Forum in Colombo recently, in which recognition of the bank's commitment to the introduction of Visa's corporate card series in the local market was highlighted. Commercial Bank recently launched Visa Signature and Visa Platinum corporate credit cards in Sri Lanka for employees of corporates and other business entities. This new product enables corporates to manage expenses of employees, and the card is linked to a corporate credit card account of each company. Welcome back to the Nightly Business Report. Stock markets in Asia gained today after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged concerns that the dollar is too strong for some countries. Yellen met with her counterparts from Japan and South Korea and said that they will continue to consult on foreign exchange markets, suggesting the US won't be upset if those countries intervene to strengthen their currencies. China's central bank also pledged to keep the yuan steady today, while Japan's Nikkei finished 0.3% higher. South Korea's KOSPI index rose 2% and Hang Seng in Hong Kong added 0.8%. Meanwhile, European shares were also heading higher. Germany's DAX index was up 0.1% and the UK's FTSE 100 added 0.4%. The major U.S. stock indices had another down day yesterday. The S&P and Nasdaq indices are down for 4 consecutive days.
U.S. stocks fell in choppy trading on Wednesday as investors continued to assess the timing of rate cuts and after a batch of soft corporate earnings. The Dow dipped roughly 0.1%, the S&P 500 shed nearly 0.6, while the Nasdaq plunged more than 1%. Equities have struggled lately, despite a rally that closed out 2023 and extended into the first quarter of this year. The S&P is on pace for its third straight weekly loss, as investors have dialed back expectations for the timing and size of rate cuts by the Federal Reserve.
Adidas has emerged from its bruising tie-in with rapper Kanye West and says it's expected to make profits of about $745 million this year. In February, the German sportswear giant said it planned to sell its remaining Yeezy trainers from its partnership with West for at least the cost price.
Adidas shares soared more than 8% on Wednesday and hit their highest level in over 2 years. Investors bought in after the German sportswear giant released positive quarterly results on Tuesday. Adidas revealed it had a better than expected first quarter and raised its profit outlook for the year on strong demand for its sneakers. It now expects full-year operating profit of about $744 million, up from around $532 million previously forecast. Adidas said quarterly operating profit reached $357.3 million, up from $63.8 million a year earlier. Back then, it was hit by the breakup with Kanye West and the discontinuation of its Yeezy business.
Investors in Tesla are calling for more information about the status of the $25,000 Model 2 EV, and Elon Musk plans to address the company's declining sales in the face of growing competition from lower-cost Chinese EVs and a global decline in demand.
Tesla investors are restless. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the company had scrapped plans for a lower-cost electric vehicle. Tesla denied the report. Then he has left shareholders hanging, providing no concrete updates on the status of the car, a Model 2 EV that would start at $25,000. Now some are demanding clear answers, not only about the car, but also about Musk's plans for addressing a sales slide amid falling demand worldwide and rising competition from cheaper Chinese EVs.
Well, that's the Nightly Business Report for this Thursday night. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sina Mayadunne. Have a good night.